Good afternoon or morning. My name is Kimberly Jones. I am the Senior Director for Talent Strategy at University of California, Irvine. And so that includes our campus, our six hospitals and 30 ambulatory clinics, and then our Health Sciences Division, which is School of Medicine, School of Nursing, School of Pharmacy, and School of Public Health.
That is awesome. So I'm very excited to talk to you. I'm going to jump right into these questions.
Please.
We both talk about this a great deal that digital natives, they are making up the majority of the workforce. Pretty soon they'll be over 75%. From a recruiting perspective, how is
Mhm.
that shifting the way that you evaluate candidates? And are you seeing any new risks emerge now that more of our lives are playing out online?
Shift in that is evolving, but not that it necessarily had to dramatically change with in an intentional way. It's part of humanity that we learn to use we develop tools and learn how to use those tools in more dynamic ways.
Okay. And then again, any risks you're seeing play out?
So I think while everybody's still mystified by AI, oh my God, I'm like, it'll be normalized, sooner versus later. You think about, candidate using AI to create a more carefully worded resume. I have no concerns with that at all. Not everybody is a good writer. And so, spatially and specific to content of using AI helps you create the best possible story of who you are. Absolutely. But would you use AI to help you navigate through interview questions? If I ask you a question in an interview, I need you to know the answers to those questions, not that there's the aid of some technology, because you may be giving an answer that's not accurate or not reflective of what your actual skill sets or competencies are. On the other side of that, I believe I just read a story where a student was contesting the fees that she paid to a university. And her concern was if my professors are using AI to create curriculum, then can I just get educated by AI and not professors? And so if I can't use AI as a student to create a paper, how can you as a professor use AI to create curriculum?
Oh,
And so I think the risk is until we really have normalized how AI as a tool, how are we policing each other when there's these, kind of power dynamic between an employer, a candidate, a professor, a student? What's permissible? What's the ethical use of AI? So again, I think a year from now, we won't even be having these discussions because we really will have normalized AI as a thing that everybody just uses and knows how to utilize.
okay. Do you currently evaluate candidates for culture ads or for culture risks?
So at the leadership level, it's definitely a discussion. And so one of the things that I've been introducing specific to talent strategy is the term organizational compatibility versus culture fit or add. And let me tell you why. So many people have this conversation, especially in the among TA professionals. Is this person a culture fit? And I challenge my peers all the time to say, did you even take the time to define our culture anchors in the job posting? And more often than not, the answer has been no. So, how can you possibly, in good conscience, attempt to screen somebody in or out for something that you haven't even declared in the job posting? That's number one. Number two, if culture is so important, what time did you set aside in the interview process to actually talk about what those culture anchors are? And then did you give you and your candidate time to ask questions and give the candidate time to answer those questions? Because you can um, speculate on a number of things. For example, I try to caution interview assessors when we're conducting debriefs to say, well, I don't think that person will be happy. Well, how do you know? Like how did you get to that summation from what was shared? And so if culture is that important, nobody should be making an assumption. It should be declared, it should be discussed, and then it can be evaluated. And then I like what you included in your question. Whether or not I hold the same values relative to culture is one thing, but I might hold a different set of values that seek to expand or amplify culture, there has to be value to that as well. And so there are times I will challenge hiring teams to say, are we hiring people to make us comfortable, or are we hiring people to help us be more competitive?
I love that you introduced a new term to me, a culture anchor. And I love that you pointed out how you are exposing blind spots in your interview process.
Yes,
That's awesome. Now,
absolutely.
let's move on to red flags because we often learn about them way too late after a person's already been hired. If you're able to, could you share an experience you had where you saw a problem post hire or shortly after post hire, and what would you have wanted to know sooner?
Yeah, so, you know, for the average individual contributor, you might have spent a total of 90 minutes, to 2 hours with a candidate. For leadership team positions, there tend to be, multiple rounds, multiple hiring team members. You have, multiple perspectives around what somebody saw or, one person picked up on. I will say that just very consistently, both green flags and red flags is a person's work style is never truly demonstrated solely through an interview. And so let me give you a couple examples. There are some people who are very diplomatic, very agreeable, not to the extent that they just acquiesce to, the majority. A person who just really has a degree of finesse working in large groups. But you also have people who may demonstrate in the environment a great deal of obstinance, and you won't get that in an interview question because an interview question is so defined. Tell me about a time when a person is giving you kind of the highlights of that and not the, you know, I sat in my office and banged out an answer that I really wanted to give a person, but then I deleted it all and then I cleaned up my answer. Like there's no way for those types of things to come out. But I will say very consistently, work style is the thing that pops up later. Again, both good and bad, that you're like, man, like I'm having an epiphany. Like Kirsten, I'm so glad we hired her, but then you also have those scenarios. You're like, did we screen for this in
Yeah.
the interview? And so I think work style is one of those intangibles that behavioral questions never give you an accurate depiction of what that person might really be like.
That's a great segue into my next question. If we gave you, or if you had the ability, I should say, to see
Mhm.
early signs of workplace misconduct that would not show up in a traditional background screening, so before someone accepts an offer of employment, what impact do you think that would have on your overall talent strategy?
Interesting, especially sitting in the state of California, specifically working in academic institutions. There was a new law that went to effect, SB 791 and AB 810. SB 791 is for staff and faculty. AB 810 is specifically for coaches and trainers working in athletic environments. And it is once a candidate has accepted an offer, we're required, if the candidate provides an affirmative response or by title, check with their previous employers to screen for things like employment misconduct. It's a balance because also in the state of California, there's a law that's banned the box. Employers are prohibited from asking candidates if they have any criminal convictions until they've had an opportunity to demonstrate that they meet the qualifications kind of post offer. And so do I believe that people deserve second chances? Absolutely. At the same time, I think there's things to be aware of that, given the right set of circumstances, I want to be objective and mitigate risk. So, for example, I'm applying to be a pharmacist and I've had a drug addiction. that creates a great deal of risk. And I would prefer you not go through all the way through a hiring process if I know I have guidelines that would prohibit me from hiring someone with an active substance abuse issue from being a pharmacist. And so, as much as we like to pontificate about who we are as HR professionals. We are human, and you want to make sure you have the right set of HR professionals, general counsel, corporate security, whoever that is, taking into account what the facts are, trying to be objective, that you're being fair to the person, but you're also mitigating risk for your organization, harm to other employees, loss of property, detrimental impact to your organization's brand. So all of those things. I think it is somewhat of a fine line to walk, but we shouldn't be shying away from it as TA professionals.
But there's an
Hmm.
episode of A Different World when Whitley had just gotten to work and one of her bosses was sexually harassing her. And he had been
Mm,
transferred multiple times. It's within the same company because other people had reported it and they didn't do anything about it. So I think if we had that data up front
mhm,
sometimes,
mhm,
and I
mhm,
understand that that's an internal candidate, so things get a little bit more, we don't really screen our internal candidates the
mhm,
same way we do external
mhm.
candidates. But even if that was someone who was looking to move to another organization because of misconduct, if there was a way for us to find those things out, there was data to have, that would definitely be something that would excite me.
Yeah, so here in the state of California, especially with all of the young ladies and athletes who were impacted by the physician at USC, the portion of the California bill around athletics, the concept is called pass the harasser, and that's part of what happened. People who had, been identified as, misconduct, but organizations are concerned about liability. Like we don't want to be accused of, defaming a person. Let's just let them leave and go somewhere else. Well, now you got these repeat offenders because they've been accommodated. And so I also put myself in the position of young adults who trust older adults. And do I want to create any scenarios where a person is at risk? And I'm like, if I sent my child to a university to be an athlete, the last thing I want to be concerned about is a coach, a trainer, a physician who is always with my child, who in some ways is in some state of undress or in a compromising physical situation. I want my child to know that I've put them in a situation where they are with adults that they can trust the same way that they trust me. And so, and then power dynamics always come into that as well, not just by title, but by your station in life. And so we have an obligation to make sure we're providing safe environments for everybody.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights and for answering my questions.